we're seeing people in power brought down in a way that I think is one of the biggest stories in our lifetime ever.
There's sort of like a whole class of people out there who maybe have never faced consequences or don't even live in fear of consequences because they think, and in some cases are right, that they can just go on and on and on without getting caught.
Even in the way that they're texting each other, they have no doubt that they will ever be exposed, which is crazy because now like the whole world can just look it up on the DOJ's website. You will be exposed, whether that take a day or so with the internet nowadays or whether it take years.
Hello everyone, welcome to Washed Up. I'm Colin, this is Abby. It is currently February 7th, and we are delivering the weekly news so you don't have to listen to the legacy media that your grandparents do.
And it's been a big week since the last time we recorded. The Epstein files have dropped 3 million of them, which is only about half. Allegedly, there's 6 million of them.
Yeah, and so we've been kind of poring over some of them, but because of the scope of it and how many files there are, it's, kind of impossible for any one person or two people to fully delve into everything that they have. But obviously, the reporting has started to come out about what other stations and outlets are finding in the documents. And so we're here to relay some of that to you guys. I'm sure everyone has also been keeping up with and hearing various different allegations and accusations flying around.
Like Trump is mentioned a lot, but nothing concrete evidence-wise. I've been seeing a lot of people reposting the stat that Trump is mentioned thousands and thousands of times. I think it's important to note too that a lot of it is so much just nonsense, like news articles and tweets and things like that. But that's also not saying that he's not innocent in even just being in that circle. I think that's a character thing as well.
Right, like a lot of the content of all of Epstein's emails are him forwarding stuff around to other people, like articles, like you said, that might mention like high profile celebrities by name, but just the fact that that name is showing up in Epstein's emails isn't necessarily, it doesn't make the person guilty just because they're associated or identified in the documents. So that's been something that's been hard to kind of parse out, like who is being mentioned in Epstein's emails because they're standing or they should be accused of certain things, or just because in passing he thought that they were interesting or noteworthy.
Who do you think is the most, I guess, most or least shocking name that you've seen in the files?
So there's a lot of buzz around Bill Gates being mentioned, but again, this he was being mentioned in a specific context where Epstein was writing a draft email to himself, but he's writing this kind of like letter to Bill Gates, saying like, I can't believe you would disregard the friendship that we've built up even after I did XYZ for you, and he was essentially insinuating that Bill Gates had contracted an STD from sleeping with a Russian and that Bill Gates had requested a medication that he could give to his wife, Melinda Gates, to help get rid of the STD before she found out about it. So that was the substance of what Epstein's email to himself about Bill Gates revealed, with again the massive caveat of that doesn't mean that that actually happened. It just means that Epstein was writing about this. And we don't really know to what end or why. It might have been part of like a blackmail scheme, like some people have claimed that Epstein did a lot. But until we actually get like a message directly to or from Bill Gates or something to that effect, we can't really know definitively.
And since then, Melinda Gates has spoken out about this too. I mean, during that time, we knew that they were having marital troubles. She had an interview with NPR and talked about th those struggles and had said that she's able to look at her own sadness and look at these young girls and separate herself from that too. Um, so she was bringing this up, which doesn't paint Bill Gates in the best light, I'd say.
So yeah, definitely not. And like you said, Bill and Melinda have since divorced, and when they divorced, it was she had made some kind of comment regarding the fact that it was over Bill's affiliation with Epstein, his association. But again, the substance of that is still not open and shut. It just is more. I don't know, it's kind of like noise or information, but the validity of it is something that's very hard to verify. And I think that cuts through with all of Epstein's emails. Like we're getting a lot of
It's a lot
loud.
of noise for
Mhm.
sure. I'd imagine, I keep thinking about the people who are actually like fully going through every single one of these files. I mean, I was telling Colin earlier that it kind of does make sense to me why it took a little bit longer to release these files in terms of how much is redacted and in terms of what was actually allowed to be out there, disregarding like really horrible images and child pornography and victims that should be protected as well.
I mean, I would say, like, my feeling about it is God bless Thomas Massey and all the people on the House Oversight Committee who are pushing to have these files released and that the DOJ release them. However, I also am now starting to understand, like you were saying, like, why did it take them so long to release them? Because there's just so much content. And I think it would make sense that they don't want to have this whole guilt by association thing happen, where, again, just because their name is being mentioned in the files, that the public is going to start piling onto these people or smearing them in some way, shape, or form. Though personally, I am in favor of the fact that they have been released.
Me
I
too.
think we're just starting to pour over them in the productive way where people can actually start to draw conclusions, but it's just going to take a while for that to happen.
Yeah, the files were released on January 30th, I think, and like we said, we're only touching kind of the iceberg of what's been released because there's so much out there.
So what did you see about Elon Musk being mentioned? Because he also, his name appeared in direct communication with Epstein.
Yeah, I saw the email that he had sent to Epstein talking about wanting to party. He he wanted to join the party island and things like that. He had said that he didn't want a peaceful island time, which I kind of thought was really stupid of him and stupid of him in how things are phrased. These people in in the emails, just another reason why it's so hard to go through them is because it's just hard to read.
Yeah, I mean, it was shocking, like how these very wealthy, very famous, very successful, quote unquote, people are in some cases like functionally illiterate.
Like the lack of grammar
Mhm.
and like just how hard it is to read it is another reason why I'm like, I don't even want to go through these files anymore.
And this is kind of like a minor point to be harping on when obviously there's huge
Yeah, yeah.
allegations. However, I do think it's important because it conveys a certain like lack of care and lack of consideration about the way that people are coming across and um, even like the intent behind these messages. It just seems like very like impulsive. It speaks to, in my mind, like someone who's not very thoughtful or careful and who thinks that they're so important that they can just like shoot off all these messages very quickly. And I don't know, I think when you get to that level of like power and influence, people are not very thoughtful about their messaging and the ways that they're communicating to other people because they really just don't care at that point.
hmm And Musk has since tweeted out that he has rejected Epstein's Island invite, I think was the way that he phrased it. And he wants people to focus on the actual people who are mentioned and have hard evidence against that. Which, I mean, I think it's also relevant to, like I said, like look at their circle, and he had been the one to reach out to him asking him where the parties are at.
For what it's worth, one of Musk's kids, who he's estranged from over the fact that this kid is transgender and Musk thinks that that's like he called it like woke mind virus. He's estranged from this kid, but his kid came out and said, actually, I can verify that we were in XYZ location at the time when this message was allegedly sent. Therefore, like adding kind of a layer of validity to it, although still not substantiating it necessarily.
I saw that too.
So that was just interesting. Other names that came out, Peter Attia was one of them, who's sort of this like longevity guru. There's a lot of people out there who like claim that they can help people like live forever if you just follow, like their prescriptions and
God.
are like a health nut all the time. And that's a whole other thing. But Peter Attia came up because downplaying his relationship to Epstein as if like, oh, it's nothing, like we met a couple of times, whatever, whatever. But then in actuality, they had messaged about pretty crass things to one another. There's a kind of ironic comment saying like something is low carb that was inappropriate, and people were getting all very offended about, which, I think is valid. Like, you shouldn't be messaging people in such a crass, disrespectful way, which leads me to just one of my points in general. Like, I hope that Gen Z is paying attention to this and that not that you self-censor yourself when you're messaging with your friends or people who you know, but like, I think it's a good policy to every message that you send, just assume it's going to be read aloud as at a part of a deposition at some point, because you should be careful and thoughtful when you're communicating and not just crass and disgusting.
People tend to hang out with the people who you are most similar to, so I'm not very surprised about the way that the messaging could be viewed and as, like you said, crass and disgusting. I really like that point you made about, Gen Z having to take this as a lesson too. Take this as a lesson in accountability and transparency. I think that Gen Z in general runs really big on wanting things to be exposed and accountability and whatnot. So I think that these people who could have been involved or could have been in a scenario like this as adults or as they get older in positions of power, like this is a lesson to them in that you will be exposed, whether that take a day or so with the internet nowadays or whether it take years.
Yeah, or even decades in some cases. But I do agree. Like, m my operating principle when I go through the world is that I think karma is real. And my personal experience of life has been that I never get away with anything. Like, it will catch up to you at some point. It's reminding me of like, there's this Johnny Cash song, and he says, like, what's done in the dark will be brought to the light. That has always been my experience of the world. Maybe other people out there have different ones, but karma for me is very instant. Like, if I do something that is sort of deviating off of the, I guess, like straight and narrow path, I tend to face consequences of it rapidly. And it blows my mind that there are people out there who genuinely do get away with things just for like we said, like years and years and years. But that's been one of the most shocking pieces of all of it to me, is realizing that there's sort of like a whole class of people out there who maybe have never faced consequences or don't even live in fear of consequences because they think, and in some cases are right, that they can just go on and on and on without getting caught.
And everything that has been exposed so far is a lot of it is really vile, disgusting things. And these people in power who just were acting in a way that they never even thought that they would get caught at all is so mind-blowing to me. I think that, like you said, I've also operated in a similar way of if I do something wrong, I'm going to get caught or punished for it. So I try to do things that I deem as, the right path or things that won't affect people in a negative manner. Even like the smallest thing in terms of treating people with kindness or decency. So the fact that there are people who just walk around who have never been touched by consequences in their life, like it's a whole, like you said, a whole other class of people that we can't even fathom being a part of.
I mean, for what it's worth, you and I were both brought up Catholic, and that's, something that affects everyone in an individual way, like your relationship to religion and rules and whatnot. But I think it's not for nothing, because when you have sort of like this ethic that you can abide by that is helping to guide your decisions, and after a certain amount of time, like growing up in a faith, you kind of adopt it or instill it instinctually as part of like your guiding. It helps guide, it creates guardrails in your life in a way that I think becomes reinforcing, where then because you're aware of consequences or in some cases afraid of consequence, it becomes your experience where every time you face a consequence, it reinforces that within your mind. But people who have no kind of guiding ethos or ethic, who are just going about life as if they'll never be facing any kind of consequence, I think they just have to keep upping the ante over and over and over again, and that becomes their reinforcing pattern instead. And it is probably also we were talking about how like we think privilege factors into that too,
Yeah.
because
I wouldn't, yeah. We were talking about how privilege factors into it. Like, privilege in the way that people are raised, I think. Like, I don't think religion is the only way that you're raised with ethics or morality or anything
yeah.
like that. Um, but when you're raised in a world where you're given everything, you're kind of expected that these consequences won't catch up to you or that you're owed things like, I don't know, all of these disgusting acts, like that you're owed this thing or that these people or victims are below you or anything like that. And even in the way that they're texting each other, they have no doubt that they will ever be exposed, which is crazy because now like the whole world can just look it up on the DOJ's website, which is so silly. Like we were looking it up even before this episode, like it just asks you if you're a robot, if you're over 18, and then you can just go through all these emails and files and tweets and everything.
Yeah, and I think the other thing is people, once they reach a certain level of wealth, just believe that they can pay their way out of any jam that they might find themselves in. And to some extent, that's true, but there's a limit to that. And I guess what we're trying to instill and reinforce for like our Gen Z audience is no matter what your background is, no matter what you might believe about what you can and can't get away with, like it, again, it will catch up to you at some point. And I think karma is real, but that's just me. One
That's
example, oh sorry,
no, you go, you
of
go.
karma being real is we were talking about Peter Attia and how
Yeah.
he had formerly downplayed his affiliations with Epstein, but he recently got a deal with CBS, now run by Barry Weiss, to kind of be like a someone who appears on CBS frequently as like either a guest or having his own show. I'm not sure, but regardless, he is now possibly facing fallout from his name appearing in these files, and there's sort of this internal discussion I've heard with CBS over how to handle this because they just publicly announced him as being a contributor for CBS now, and they have to decide, are they going to carry that out or are they going to cut him loose because it looks bad, might reflect bad on CBS?
What do you think the right PR move would be for that?
I think they should cut him loose.
Yeah, I agree with
I'm
that.
not a fan of like cancel culture, which we've talked about at length. And Barry Weiss is not a fan of cancel culture either. That's kind of why she started the Free Press. But to me, this isn't really an example of canceling someone. Um, it's more of just like again the consequences
Your
of
action.
his actions and what he
Yeah, I think
said.
it's a really clear distinction between being held accountable for something versus quote like cancel culture. I feel like cancel culture is like more social versus when you're being held accountable for something, you did something wrong.
Right, like
Like you're being punished for
he's
it.
not being canceled for a belief he holds. He's being canceled for something he actually did, and the files showed that he was in communication, and that reflects badly on him and now his possible employer.
Hmm. Who else have we seen? What about the Clintons? What are you
Oh
thinking about
God,
that? I
what
mean,
about the
in
Clintons?
in December, in the first release, we already saw like Bill Clinton being seen swimming in a pool with some
Mhm.
girls, and it looks very suspicious. They've since spoken out about it too, and they're gonna testify.
Yeah, initially, so they were called in to testify for before Congress by James Comer, and they were saying we're not going to do it. Like everyone has a line in the sand, and like we can't participate in this. It's like, they're kind of making it sound like this was somehow like they're being like singled out in a erroneous way. But so they said we're not going to testify, but then they changed that after these files came out. Now they are going to testify, and Hillary Clinton and Bill, I think, are saying they want to do it publicly so that, people can watch
You
it.
know, I hope it's public.
Yeah, I think it should be. Like, I would rather the transparency of it than behind closed doors where we can't hear them answer for it.
Hmm. I think all of it should be public, especially, I mean, the files are 3 million of them are already out. I think that it should continue to be publicized. I almost think that some things are a bit too nonchalant too, in terms of the Epstein files. Like I don't even think it's all over everywhere as much as it should be.
Yeah, I mean, there's some people who are even rushing to say like this is all a witch hunt. Who like they were trying to extort Epstein, and there's no smoking gun that he was ever like let's say sexually assaulting, raping kids or underage women or anything like that. they're trying to defend him still, saying like this is all just an extension of like whatever you think about the Me Too movement and how people in some cases were leveraging like accusations, in some cases false accusations against people for different
Hmm.
like power motives and whatnot. I don't know, like to me, there's just no defending
Definitely. I
Epstein.
know. I'm like, this is a smoking gun. Like, I can't believe there are even people who are still defending him. Like, what stake do you have in the game to be doing that?
So, like one person was Michael Tracy, who's been out there, but he's been investigating Epstein and the women who have accused him of nefarious acts. He's been investigating them for a long time, even when they held a press conference outside of Congress with the Epstein victims and accusers. He was there kind of like heckling them, and I thought that was it's okay to ask questions and to even like sift through someone's testimony. And I don't think it's wrong to nitpick if something about someone's testimony isn't lining up or you can verifiably prove that it's not true. But yeah, Michael Tracy on X was just saying like, again, this is a witch hunt. And to me, there's enough evidence that I've personally seen that I don't think it's a witch hunt, but there are still people defending saying that narrative.
I definitely don't think it's a witch hunt. I think that these things should be nitpicked at, and I think that, like I said, it should be publicized and people should be making a bigger deal of it than it actually is.
And just with the caveat being, again, the whole guilt by association thing, neither of us are in favor of that. You have to be very discerning when just because someone's name comes up in association with someone, that doesn't mean that they've committed some wrongdoing.
Hmm.
Yeah. What other names? There's still more. We've
Prince
said the
Andrew,
Clintons, Prince Andrew. Yeah. What did you see about Andrew?
I saw a very incriminating photo of Prince Andrew over what it looks like an unconscious person.
It's a really
Um,
creepy photo.
Disgusting, literally. I can't. It photos like that, and these stories are just. It brings so much disgust to my body that it's like, holy shit. Like, this is why I'm saying like it should be a bigger deal than people are making it. Like there are some people I think who are even just like making all these jokes, and like there are a lot of memes online about things like this, but we're seeing people in power brought down in a way that I think is one of the biggest stories in our lifetime ever. Yeah.
I mean, yeah, this has ruined some very high profile people. Like
Ruined as should.
Andrew's reputation is destroyed and he did it himself. And we had seen pictures of him with Virginia Giuffre and Ghislaine Maxwell, who was Epstein's like longtime associate accomplice. But we hadn't seen that photo of Andrew like over a girl or woman. It's hard to tell exactly, but yeah, she looks unconscious and it's one of the creepier photos I've ever seen, period.
Hmm.
And he lost a lot of his title, his mansion, and like the royal family in the UK has had to distance themselves completely from Andrew, as they should, because this is disgusting and not only reflects horribly on the whole institution of like the British monarchy, but just it's horrible.
And it shows how this whole class of people defies what I would say is like internationally, like partisan wise, like people who are making this a partisan issue are also really annoying me in that I'm like, these are all people in power slash very rich individuals who think that they can get away with something, and it's not about, I think, partisan lines.
Definitely. And yeah, like you said, the House Oversight Committee, who was the mover behind getting this released, it was made up of Democrats and Republicans, and it's honestly been one of the most heartening things that I've seen in a long time to see them work together on this. You can claim that, well, like Trump was saying, was a Democrat hoax. I think that's just blatantly false, and we can all see that now.
Hmm.
But yeah, the way people have tried to kind of weaponize this for one side or the other is missing the broader point, which we just laid out about what does the story really show, and the way that it's brought people down, destroyed their reputations, and in some cases had them stripped of everything. I think that's the real story here. So some other names, because we're still not done. There's still more. Noam Chomsky, who has been someone who has shaped the discourse in a lot of ways within academia, particularly, but also with like foreign policy. He's said a lot of things that kind of ran counter to like the neoconservative pro-war agenda. So a lot of people are very much in favor of Chomsky, but he's also very elderly now, like 97 years old. But he had communicated with Epstein pertaining to Epstein. All these allegations were starting to emerge about Epstein, and he was asking Chomsky, like, how should I handle this? And Chomsky was giving advice to Epstein that, by today's standards, reflects poorly on Chomsky because he's saying,
He
like,
was trying to ignore
mm,
things, um, which is definitely the worst possible way you could go about something like this.
yeah, just kind of like minimizing the accusations, despite the fact that Epstein had earlier in 2008 actually been convicted and was like a
Right.
sex offender. And so to ignore or downplay or minimize the accusations that were starting to reemerge about Epstein is just ridiculous and misguided in so many ways. So a lot of people are rightfully so, in my view, disappointed with Chomsky, although he can't really answer for it because he's now so elderly,
So,
had a stroke and all this.
yeah, it's really interesting to see like you said like that back then versus even now. I don't think that anyone would advise somebody to ignore something as big as this right now. Though, I mean, if there was less people on it or less people pressuring people to be exposed, maybe that is something that the very rich would say because they're so used to getting away with things.
Mhm. So there's kind of another angle here that we're gonna, I think, tap into a bit. What have you seen about Epstein's alleged connections with intelligence, whether that be foreign intelligence or US intelligence?
Yeah, I think that the emails also reveal a lot about how I keep coming back to this theme of like class of people. When you're really, really connected in things, like you have so much more power in the sway of things. Like I saw that Palantir was brought up with Epstein and almost getting these people's approval first over, like the government or
Mhm.
the people in terms of how decisions are being made across politics.
So just before this, we were listening to an audio of Epstein talking with Ehud Barak, who's the former Prime Minister of Israel, and they're talking specifically about Palantir. And Epstein is kind of like trying to get Ehud Barak to look into Palantir and like telling him about Peter Thiel and like, oh, have you seen what they're up to? And basically, what Palantir is like it data collects data on citizens and
Hmm.
uses it for different like technology and has different applications and like surveillance and even like I think like drone war technology. But anyway, so that's very controversial because the surveillance technology that they have developed with Palantir is already extremely controversial in the ways that it kind of erodes like people's rights. But then also on top of that,
That's another thing I think people are a little too nonchalant about.
the idea that like Epstein would be pitching this to someone like in the Israel government is troubling to say the least.
Just a little bit.
But so yeah, so he definitely had connections to Israel. Some people are saying like the narrative about Epstein that's come out since I want to say this past summer, but even longer than that was he an agent somehow of Mossad, Israeli intelligence, and people have speculated that maybe he was collecting blackmail on all these high profile people on behalf of a foreign government such as Israel. I've also heard though people are saying that he was doing it on behalf of Russia. Some people are saying he was, like there's no I would hesitate to conclude that he was an agent of any particular government. But just wanted to put that out there that it's being speculated about. Israel's come up. The Washington Post was saying he had affiliations with the Russian government's officials high up in that government. Um, and so it's not really clear yet, but we'll get back to you on that.
I think, yeah. Yeah, it's not very clear yet, but it's definitely very suspicious. I think when we were going through a lot of things, we were like, that's suspicious. there's no hard evidence, but I think that we should not let this go immediately.
It goes back to when Epstein was first, he had this like really light plea deal for the charges against him of soliciting a, this was in 2008, when he was convicted of soliciting a minor for prostitution. He got a very light plea deal, and people were blaming Alex Acosta, who I guess was handling that case, for the fact that Epstein got off on such a light charge. And this came back up again when Alex Acosta was being confirmed to be the labor secretary under Trump's first administration. They're saying, why did you let Epstein off so easy? And Acosta had said, I was told that it was above my pay grade and that Epstein was intelligence. Basically, like you can't touch him because he is working on behalf of another, you know, agency, I guess you could say. And so that was a very strange remark by Acosta at the time, and he got a lot of heat for it. But it just kind of that was the first time it had been raised that maybe Epstein was an agent of whether again like foreign intelligence, U.S. intelligence, where we can't really say at this moment. But that was the first time that got raised as an issue, and I would say these files don't disprove that claim. In fact, they might even
I think
affirm
it
it.
adds to it. Yeah.
They might even affirm it because, joking or not, it didn't disprove the existing narrative that he might be an asset.
Right. Um, Going back to things that are mentioned a lot in the Epstein files, people online are talking about how often pizza is mentioned. So Pizzagate has been a bit trending on social media. And, Pizzagate has always been this like conspiracy in the back of the internet world where the pizza metaphor is referring to like sex trafficking and sex rings and things like that. What do you think about that?
Right. I mean, so it started under Trump's first term with QAnon and the conspiracy that, yeah, the government was infiltrated and run by a child sex trafficking ring, basically. And that was the whole, like, again, QAnon conspiracy. And they saying, like, Trump was elected to bring light to end that sex trafficking ring. That was the conspiracy at the time, but that led to the Pizzagate situation where there was a shooting at Comet Ping Pong Pizza
Hmm.
in Washington, D.C., where someone brought a gun because they were convinced that that location was harboring sex trafficking victims and people running this trafficking ring. And that did not come to fruition. Like they couldn't tie any evidence that there was this operation at that specific location. And the man who brought the gun to that pizza shop was, arrested. But it was just like this bizarre situation that shed light on like there are a lot of crazy accusations flying around, and not all of them are going to be true. But just because they're not true to the letter in terms of substance doesn't mean that there isn't something nefarious going on. There very
Right.
much could be. And we've seen with the Epstein files, there is nefarious stuff going on at the highest levels of government in these very powerful, influential circles. It may not be what people have alleged necessarily, like with
Like
QAnon,
not
but
every single conspiracy is 100% right, but that doesn't mean that these people aren't guilty of something.
mm. So like Mike Benz was on Joe Rogan's show and he had said it's a bad week to be a Pizzagate denier. And again, reiterating, there's no like proof positive in the files that they're using pizza as like a coded phrase, but I think, again, even if in substance the QAnon and Pizzagate conspiracies aren't being proven, they're also not slamming the door shut on the fact that something adjacent to that could actually have occurred.
Right.
Anywho, okay, what else do we got? Um, one funny meme that came out of this.
The one funny thing.
I saw a really funny X post where someone had said, "Wow, I can't believe that Dick Cheney is not in the files at all. He must have just been doing it for the love of the game." And I thought that was actually kind of funny because,
Maybe it's in the other 3 million files
yeah, we'll
and he
see
just got lucky or something
when
like that.
those emerge. But I guess where do we go from here is another. question. Ghislaine Maxwell is set to testify on Monday for the House Oversight Committee. She's going to be doing it virtually, and her lawyers said that she's likely to plead the fifth, so not much will come of that likely. But then we also brought up the Clintons are going to be testifying.
Yeah, I'm really interested to see what the Clintons say. And like I said, I really hope that's publicized.
And as far as again where we go from here, Todd Blanche is the Deputy Attorney General, and he was taking questions soon after the files emerged, and one of the reporters asked him, like, are we going to expect any new charges or like prosecution against the men who committed these acts? And Blanche was kind of gave a very,
Wasn't he kind of wishy-washy?
it was wishy-washy and defensive at the same time, which is a tricky combination to
Yeah.
pull off, but he did.
Somehow, somehow.
And he said he was defensive. He's like, what men? Like, what are you talking about? And then the reporter just repeated himself because he was pretty like clear in his phrasing of the question. And then Blanche was like, we already said like we will prosecute anyone if there's evidence that they've committed wrongdoing, and we'll pursue it to the full
I
extent.
said this earlier, there's this built-in assumption that somehow there's this hidden tranche of information of men that we know about that we're covering up or that we're choosing not to prosecute. That is not the case. I don't know whether there are men out there that abuse these women. If we learn about information and evidence that allows us to prosecute them, you better believe we will. But I don't think that the public or you all are going to uncover men within the Epstein files that abuse women.
Yeah, and again, kind of defending the DOJ's track record on these files and their release and the handling of who has been prosecuted or required to testify so far. And I just think it's bogus. There's so many strategic missteps that the DOJ has committed in the process of this that, in my view, Todd Blanche may be right that there isn't enough evidence to prosecute people. I don't, we'll see, but even if he is right about that, there's no denying the strategic missteps and communication missteps that the DOJ has, you know, experienced around Epstein.
Yeah, and that's another thing that I think people aren't talking enough about, to be honest.
It was about a year ago exactly. We reported on it on Washed Up when Pam Bondi like gave a bunch of influencers these binders that said like Epstein
Oh my
documents phase
God. Wait,
one.
I can't believe that was a year ago. And it
Everything
was
comes
nothing.
full
And it
circle.
was nothing.
Right. So she
And
had
that was a lot of Republican people were Republican influencers, MAGA influencers were super upset about that too.
because at the time what she gave them had nothing new in it. And then later, a couple of months later, she had tried to say like, well, the files are on my desk and we'll release them as soon as we can. And then she backtracked again and said like, there are no files to release. And even was telling people like commentators like Ben Shapiro had said like, I have sources deep in the administration and they're saying that there are no files. And if there were, then they would have been released already. And
And
then
now a year later,
here we are.
now a year later, and Trump is saying, why aren't we moving on from this?
Yeah, he famously said that over the summer and got a lot of his base really angry because they're like, "What do you mean? What do you mean, Epstein?" Like, clearly.
When that was something that he ran on to.
Mhm. So, what do you think his base is feeling right now? Now that the files have come out, do you think it's going to affect Trump politically one way or the other, or like you said, people are being very nonchalant in our view and just kind of moving on, it seems.
I think that with the news cycle right now, it could be easy for people to move on from the Epstein files because there's so much going on around the US right now. I mean, the last like three episodes we reported on have to do with ICE, and I think that people are also just tired in terms of how the news cycle is affecting the average American, especially those who keep up with the news. But I think it's important to say, like, we shouldn't let this go, which I think is why we're even doing this episode largely dedicated to the Epstein files.
Yeah, I think if you were gonna phrase it or coin a new term, you could say like Epstein fatigue in a way. And it's because this story has dragged on for so long. It first happened when Epstein was found dead in like 2019, but then now here we are like 6, almost 7 years later. And I think people are a little bit worn out and like you said, there's so much else going on in the news with like immigration in Minneapolis, and are we going to go to war with Iran? And they keep like playing all of these other things up, and
Melania's documentary.
exactly. Um, Actually, funny thing about that, someone had posted a picture of Melania in like a white dress with black stripes, and they posted it beside a redacted Epstein file, and it said who wore it best. And that made me laugh too. But yeah, the distractions and what in the news cycle at this current moment could be a distraction from Epstein? That's something we've been asking ourselves for years at this point, but
hmm
especially in this moment.
Yeah, especially like with the way that Trump has been handling things and talking about even like Minnesota and ICE, and drawbacks there. Like I think even then I was like, okay, where are these files? And now, like we said, there's so many to go through that I I think it's important to keep going through them and keep up with them and, pressure the administration and the DOJ to release the other 3 million.
Right. I mean, we'll keep on this story. I think legacy outlets, it's kind of incumbent on them to keep on this story, and I do think they will as we delve deeper and deeper into what might be in the files. And again, we want to touch on again at some point if there's any connection between Epstein and intelligence of any foreign nation or our own country. There's still questions about, again, like how did he make his money? Did he actually die by suicide, or was he perhaps killed in his jail cell? Like, there's still questions. And we shouldn't let up on trying to find the answer to those questions, even if it is going to take a little bit of time. It's well worth it, I think, in my opinion.
Yeah, biggest story by far ever, and I don't think that we should let it slip through our fingers.
But that's all right now that I really have to report on Epstein. And if we did want to talk a little bit about the other stuff that's been in the news, because it's also important, even though, again, I think perhaps secondary to Epstein.
Yeah. And people who are reporting on it and largely dedicated to reporting on only the Epstein files right now, I'm honestly thoroughly impressed because there's just so much to
Like,
go
God
through.
bless them.
Like this is just the tip of the iceberg in terms of, I guess, the most popular or notable names of powerful people in that are mentioned throughout it.
The last thing I have to say about it is apparently members of Congress are going to be allowed to review the unredacted files. And I guess like starting Monday, apparently some of them are going to be reviewing those. And so that'll be good because, it might be like that's what our elected officials are for, is they're going to be interfacing with like the executive branch and different agencies to try to get information on behalf of their constituents, us. And so we might not be able to view all the files unredacted for, again, they might say national security reasons or blah, 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 whatever excuse. But our elected officials should be able to. There's no reason why they shouldn't. And I hope that they do. And I hope that they tell us if there's anything we should know.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think that when it comes to the unredacted versus the redacted portions, I don't think that anyone should be protected in terms of involvement or mentioning or anything like that in the redacted portions besides, like victims and if there's any child pornography and things like that. Like I don't think I I think that those people should be protected, but if it's, correspondence between A and B in an email, like I don't understand why those names are redacted at all.
Even the national security stuff, I think we should know that as well. Like, that seems like a lame excuse to me because if, let's say, our government was compromised or, we had agents running around from foreign countries in the US, like, there might be national security reasons why it's not advisable that the general public know that, but I still think it's better if we do versus if we don't.
Yeah, and we talk a lot about on Washed Up transparency and whether or not it is better to know things or if the government should have some secrets in terms of, I guess, national security. But national security is such a broad umbrella. I think that there could be this argument that anything can be hidden in terms of protecting us and national security.
Mhm. Yeah, and they did that with COVID too, saying like, well, we'll tell you what you need to know and just like obey what we tell you because national security.
National, yeah, it's like the go-to answer for if they don't want to tell us something, which I don't think we should always accept.
Okay, so other stuff happening in the country and in the news. As you had mentioned that they're drawing back from 3,000 ICE agents deployed in Minneapolis down to 2,300, which is still a lot,
Hmm.
but it's I think a step in the right direction. Do you have anything to add about that? We've been harping on it for a little bit.
Yeah, Trump's definitely pulling back a little bit there. I think that there still needs to be more of a pullback. Um, People in Minnesota are still angry. I'm still looking at people's posts, and I haven't seen it escalate in terms of violence or anything still.
Another step in the right direction. So we said Tom Homan is now kind of running the show with the Minneapolis operation. He's drawing back, which is good. Also, they're implementing body cam for all of the agents there, which is also a good accountability measure in my view. And apparently there is body cam footage from the shooting of Alex Preddy also, which I have not seen released
I haven't
yet,
seen that either.
but we've heard from DHS that that does exist. So whether or not that will shed any light, I don't know. I don't think we need the body cam footage personally because we can kind of see it from many different angles already. But again, in the interest of transparency, like why not release it?
Hmm.
I think even Trump had said he would be in favor of releasing that footage since they have it.
Yeah,
Uh,
footage that definitely goes against whatever DHS is saying right now about Alex Preddy's death.
but yeah, to your point, I don't think it's escalated in terms of violence in Minneapolis. But I do think the people of Minneapolis continue to feel terrorized. Just the fact that the agents are wearing masks, and I've seen footage of like agents cutting people off in traffic and like getting out of the car, pulling people out of their cars to arrest them for various different things. Like we're talking about U.S. citizens, not like people who they claim to be there to deport. So it just continues to be a messy situation. Although, again, I think it's moving in a better direction under Homan than it was under Bovino or no.
Hmm. Getting Bavino and Nomad out of there was definitely the right decision.
Also, I have an update because we've been reporting about the National Guard being deployed across many different US cities, but especially in DC where we are. And when they first deployed the Guard, one of our concerns, we kept talking about how much is this costing? Like
Oh yeah.
what is the economic consequence or to the burden to the taxpayer of having the Guard out there? And we have an answer for you. Since from June of 25 to December of 25, they spent almost $500 million to have the National Guard deployed in all the various different cities, including DC. So yeah, that's not a small amount at all. And just thought that was a worthwhile update while we're on the topic of the paramilitary forces running around our country.
And I'm still in favor of getting them out of here.
Yeah, I mean, especially right now, there's not really a
Oh, that's so
reason.
much money.
I mean, yeah, right now, like everyone is snowed in DC. We've been having the worst weather, and everyone has kind of been trapped inside for like 2 weeks. So it's like, why is the guard? I do see them out there
I
still.
see them out there even when it was when the snow first started. I even saw them out there. A couple of them were like in their cars and people would be like making jokes like what are they doing out here? Like it's literally no one is walking these streets right now. And this is a question I've been asking since I got here. But yeah, the snow has not kicked them out either. And I'm wondering when Trump will let them leave.
ICE is bringing crime rates down, but not the ICE that Chrissy Nome is supporting.
Definitely not that.
Okay, that's all I got for all of those updates. What about something light, the Super
Chill.
Bowl?
Okay, yeah, today's Saturday. Tomorrow is the Super Bowl. And not that I know much about sports in general. The Patriots are playing the Seahawks. But in terms of like pop culture news, Bad Bunny is performing, which I'm excited about personally, but some people are very much not, which I think is the argument right now about um, the Super Bowl performance in terms of people being angry about his performance and why is he performing?
I think he did well at the Grammys, which just happened. Correct me if I'm wrong, his album won, I think, Album of the Year, right?
Yeah, and it's like the first completely Spanish album to win Album of the Year, which I think is really cool. He even his speech, he called out ICE too, which a lot of celebrities did that. A few of them were wearing the ICE out pins too, and using their chance to win of calling out people and things like that. I don't see why people are angry about Bad Bunny performing at the Super Bowl. I don't think, I mean, we haven't always, well, first of all, Bad Bunny's Puerto Rican, which is still a part of America. And some people are saying that we should have American artists perform. But even with that argument, the performers haven't always been American anyways. So I think it's just strange that people are getting upset over that.
I do remember when he was announced as the performer, again, it happened like about a year ago, and people, like you said, were outraged because they're like, well, he doesn't even speak English. We're not going to even understand it, which is dumb because a lot of Americans do speak Spanish and can understand. But when he was announced, people were saying like people were worried that like ICE was gonna use this as an opportunity to like set up shop outside the Super Bowl and like round up
Oh
people who
God.
they thought might be undocumented or whatever. And it actually I think prompted DHS to say publicly that they were not going to do that. But people were making jokes about this. Even like South Park has been relentlessly attacking DHS and ICE. There was a parody of that whole situation where they had ICE on South Park, like rounding up people outside of a Dora convention or something, and just making a mockery of DHS. But luckily, I think they're not going to carry out those plans or capitalize off
Yeah,
of Bad Bunny's presence
yeah, I
to
can't see
arrest
that
people.
happening. I largely tune in to the Super Bowl to watch commercials and the halftime performance, so I'm excited to watch him perform. But there's also the alternative halftime performance if people are watching that put on by Turning Point. I don't know if you saw that.
Mm-mm.
Oh, there's Turning Point is hosting an alternative American halftime show at the same time. Kid Rock will be performing,
Man, they love
um,
Kid Rock.
which is just so interesting to me. I'm like, why is this so politicized in that way? Like, oh gosh, like it's embarrassing to me a little
You
bit.
might say a grift.
One might say.
So I remember last year Kendrick Lamar performed with SZA, and that was a really good show.
So good.
What are some other past halftime shows that you just think are like the best or most iconic?
Michael Jackson. I mean, not that we were alive during that time, but or like conscious enough to understand in its reruns and stuff. But I was looking up the most iconic like Super Bowl performance, and I did watch Michael Jackson's performance. I thought that one was crazy.
Mm. The one that sticks out to me was Lady Gaga a
Hmm.
couple, like, I want to say like 2017 maybe. It was about 10 years ago, but it was a really interesting performance. I remember she like came in somehow from the sky and like dropped onto the stage and it was good. And, she is still her career, she had a very successful career so far and just won a Best Pop Vocal Album at the Grammys this
Which
past.
we've talked a lot about.
Yeah, she won for Mayhem, which was my favorite album of last year, so I was glad that she won that one.
Hmm. Well, I will be watching tomorrow's Super Bowl performance for sure.
I will be too,
Not the Turning Point one.
possibly. I might wait and hear if it's worth watching and then I'll decide, but I probably will end up watching.
Yep. And that is all I have on pop culture, Epstein, everything, which is a
That's
silly combination to say out loud.
that's all that we have on the biggest political scandal of the last couple of decades.
Right, right. Which is probably not all we have. We'll probably continue to talk about it and continue sifting through things. Um, and see honestly what legacy media says about it too, which I know that we mentioned they haven't even really reported on it as much as I think they should because there's just so much to look at and not get wrong.
I'd love to see what Barry Weiss has to say about all of this.
Right. Okay. Washed
Washed
up
up
out.
out.